The desert night stretched endlessly, cold and silent, except for the whisper of wind across the sand. He lay beneath a lone mesquite tree, muscles aching, body bruised and battered from days of wandering. Every step had been a struggle, and now, as he pressed his hand to his chest, he thought his life had finally run out. The moonlight cast long, pale shadows across the desert, illuminating his exhaustion. For a brief moment he thought only of surrender, of lying there until the night claimed him entirely, until the harsh world no longer required his endurance. A soft sound stirred in the shadows, subtle but unmistakable, the crack of footsteps on dry sand. His breath caught, heart thundering, expecting bandits or predators. Instead, a figure emerged wrapped in a coarse blanket, carrying a small bundle of supplies. She moved with quiet precision, every step deliberate. His eyes widened as he realized who she was. An Apache widow, alone in the desert like him, yet stronger than most men he had met. Her eyes met his, cautiously wary, but not cruel or resentful. She offered him a small gourd of water without a word, gesturing for him to drink. The relief was immediate and profound. His parched throat burned as he gulped down the water, and he felt the strength returning to his limbs, bit by bit. She placed the bundle beside him, opening it to reveal a thin blanket and a small pouch of food. Her gestures were silent, but kind, deliberate, almost ceremonial. He tried to speak, to thank her, but words failed him. It was enough that she had extended a hand, offering life when he had none left to spare. In that quiet night, with only moonlight and sand for witnesses, he felt a glimmer of hope. As he wrapped himself in the blanket, he noticed the care with which she moved. She did not sit near him, did not hover, did not demand attention. Instead, she kept her distance while remaining close enough to offer protection. He marveled at her awareness of danger, her understanding of the desert's quiet threats, the rustle of small animals, the whisper of shifting sand, the sudden distant howl of coyotes. Each movement she made seemed calculated to safeguard both herself and him. In that moment, he realized the depth of her courage, not born of aggression but of survival, patience, and keen awareness of her surroundings. The night seemed longer than it should have been, yet under her watchful presence, he slept. His dreams were restless, filled with shadows of the past, fleeing bandits, harsh suns, and empty water bags. But when he woke, she was still there, sitting near the fire she had lit carefully, tending it with quiet hands. The smoke spiraled upward into the cold air, carrying warmth and the scent of sage. He felt an unfamiliar sense of safety. Though he was a stranger in her world, she had given him trust, and that trust was enough to restore a part of his will to survive. Morning came slowly, casting a pale glow across the desert horizon. The first rays of sun illuminated the fine grains of sand, and for the first time in days, he noticed the subtle beauty of the landscape, distant mesas, desert flowers clinging to life, and the soft rise and fall of the dunes. She offered him a small meal and he accepted, eating slowly while she watched silently. Her presence was calm, unobtrusive, yet reassuring. Every gesture conveyed respect, as if she understood that dignity was as important as survival, and that trust once offered must be honored. After breakfast, she began to prepare a route for them to travel. Using her knowledge of the terrain, she indicated which paths were safest, where water might be found, and which areas to avoid. He followed closely, learning from her, grateful for her guidance. With each step, he realized the extent of her wisdom and resilience. The desert could be unforgiving, yet she navigated it with ease, demonstrating not only survival skills, but a deep understanding of the land and its rhythms. In her presence, he felt both humbled and inspired. The journey continued through the day. The sun rose higher, heating the sand and testing their endurance. She moved gracefully, pacing herself while ensuring he could keep up. Occasionally, she would glance back, checking his condition, offering water or shade when needed. The bond between them, unspoken and fragile, grew with every passing mile. In silence, they shared a mutual respect. both understanding that survival in this harsh land required patience, skill, and quiet courage. For the first time, he felt that someone could care without asking for anything in return. By evening, they reached a small, sheltered ravine. She set up a temporary camp, and he rested near the fire she lit, his body exhausted but his mind slowly clearing. He watched her move, tending to small tasks with care and precision. It was remarkable how seamlessly she adapted to every circumstance, how she turned scarcity into sufficiency. In the warmth of the fire, surrounded by the soft murmur of the desert, he began to feel something long forgotten: hope. The night would be cold, but under her guidance, he felt he could endure it. As the stars emerged, he found the courage to speak. "Why did you help me?" he asked, voice low but sincere. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. "Because it was right," she said simply. "No one deserves to be left to die when there is a chance to help." Her words were direct, devoid of pride or accusation. They carried the weight of experience, of a life spent navigating hardship and choosing compassion despite danger. In that moment, he realized that courage could take many forms, not only in action, but in choosing kindness. They spent the night in quiet reflection, each respecting the other's space while acknowledging the shared experience of survival. The wind rustled softly, carrying sand and sage, and the fire cast long shadows that danced across the ravine walls. Though they had spoken little, a mutual understanding had grown, solidifying into trust. By the time dawn approached, he felt renewed strength and a sense of purpose. The desert was still harsh, but with her guidance, he had learned that survival was possible and that human connection could offer life even in the loneliest places. Morning brought a gentle light, revealing the subtle beauty of the desert and the quiet power of the Apache widow. She motioned for him to follow as she led them to safer terrain. Every step was deliberate, measured, a lesson in patience and respect for the harsh world around them. He followed willingly, realizing that his survival depended not only on his own strength, but also on her wisdom. By the time the sun climbed high, he understood that courage, trust, and compassion were just as essential as physical endurance in the unforgiving Wild West. As they reached a distant ridge overlooking the desert valley, he paused, taking in the vast expanse of sand, mesas and distant forests. She stopped beside him, silent but steady. The wind tugged at their clothing, carrying a sense of freedom he had never known. He realized that he had survived not by chance, but through the quiet guidance of someone who had acted selflessly, whose presence had offered life when death had seemed inevitable. He bowed his head slightly in gratitude, understanding the profound impact of her compassion. The journey continued, slower now, not out of necessity, but out of choice. He walked beside her, respecting her space, observing her careful navigation of the desert paths. Each gesture, each glance, reinforced the unspoken bond forming between them. For the first time, he felt hope that life could continue, that survival was possible not just through physical endurance, but through trust, guidance, and human connection. The harsh desert had become a classroom, and she its quiet, wise teacher. By evening, they discovered a shallow creek where water flowed freely. She knelt to test it, motioning for him to drink. He did so, savoring the life-giving liquid and feeling a sense of renewal. "This place," he said softly. "I never imagined I'd find such safety in all this desert." She smiled faintly, not with humor, but with acknowledgement of truth. The wilderness could be cruel, yet those who understood it and acted with courage could find sanctuary even in its harshest reaches. As night fell, they set up a temporary camp, the fire casting warm light across the sand. He wrapped himself in the blanket she had provided, reflecting on the past day's events. He had come to the desert expecting death, but instead he had found life, guided by a woman whose strength and compassion had saved him. For the first time in years, he felt the possibility of a future, however uncertain, shaped not by cruelty or chance, but by courage, trust, and human connection. He awoke slowly, the first rays of dawn filtering softly across the desert, turning the sand a gentle gold. The chill of the night lingered in the air, and he shivered, pulling the blanket closer. Across the small clearing, he saw her tending a modest fire, the smoke curling upward and catching the light. She moved with quiet confidence, each gesture deliberate and efficient. He watched her, amazed at how she could remain so composed in a landscape that seemed determined to challenge anyone who dared cross it. Her presence was steady, a calm anchor in the vast emptiness. She handed him a small plate with dried meat and corn, simple provisions that tasted more nourishing than any feast he had eaten in weeks. "Eat," she said, her voice soft yet firm. He hesitated, unused to being offered help without strings attached. Relief and confusion warred within him as he accepted the food. Every bite warmed him more than the fire ever could, rekindling strength and hope he had thought lost. Her eyes never wavered from him, observing without judgment, offering silent reassurance. In that quiet morning light, he began to understand the power of simple kindness. After he finished eating, she handed him a blanket to wrap around himself more fully. Her gestures were quiet, almost ritualistic, yet filled with care. He noticed the small details, the way her fingers handled the firewood, the careful stacking of stones to maintain the flame, the watchful glance toward the horizon. It was clear she was experienced, familiar with the dangers of the desert and how to survive them. For a man who had thought himself abandoned and alone, this was a revelation. The desert was not just harsh, it was also a place where wisdom and courage could create safety. He tried to speak, to ask her name, but found his throat dry and words failing him. Instead, he nodded in gratitude, and she gave a faint, approving smile. Together they sat near the fire, sharing silence as though it were a conversation in itself. The sun rose higher, illuminating the sweeping dunes, distant mesas, and scattered vegetation. The harshness of the desert softened in the morning light, yet it remained imposing, a reminder that survival was a daily struggle. And yet, in her presence, the struggle felt bearable, even hopeful. She motioned for him to follow her, leading the way along a narrow trail that wound through the rocky terrain. He noticed how she moved with precision, aware of every loose stone, every hidden crevice. Her footsteps were light but deliberate, showing confidence in the land that he lacked. He followed closely, grateful for her guidance and mindful of her instructions, knowing that one wrong step could cost them dearly. In silence, they moved through the desert, two broken souls finding solace in the quiet companionship of another, each step strengthening trust that words could not express. Along the path, she paused occasionally to indicate water sources or safe areas to rest, using small gestures and concise directions. He watched and learned, absorbing her knowledge like a man discovering a secret map for survival. She spoke sparingly, choosing her words carefully, emphasizing efficiency over comfort. Yet in her minimal communication, there was warmth and concern. He realized that this was trust expressed not through spoken promises, but through action, patience, and silent guidance. It was a lesson in living and surviving, one that required observation, attentiveness, and mutual respect. The sun climbed higher, warming their backs as they continued. She led him past jagged rocks and through hidden washes, demonstrating an understanding of the desert that seemed almost instinctual. He struggled at times, fatigue pressing down, but she offered water and encouragement without condescension. Her quiet confidence inspired him, and he found strength in following her lead. In that vast, empty landscape, he realized that the harsh desert could be tamed, not by brute force, but by wisdom, patience, and cooperation. Each step forward was a small victory, a testament to survival and human connection. By mid-afternoon, they reached a shaded alcove beneath a cluster of rocks, providing a temporary refuge from the sun. She gestured for him to rest while she tended to small tasks, checking for edible plants, stacking stones to create windbreaks, and maintaining a steady fire. He observed her, noting her efficiency and care, realizing that she had learned to survive in ways he had never considered. Her strength was quiet but undeniable, a combination of experience, courage, and intelligence that left him both humbled and grateful. He began to understand that survival depended on more than endurance. It required awareness, skill, and trust. As the heat began to wane, he ventured a conversation, asking her questions about the land, the animals, and the desert nights. She answered patiently, explaining details of navigation, food sources, and hidden dangers. Her knowledge was vast, and he listened intently, absorbing every lesson. In sharing her expertise, she offered him more than survival. She offered empowerment. For a man who had felt powerless in the wilderness, this exchange was transformative. He began to feel capable again, not as a man rescued, but as one learning to navigate and respect the world around him. As evening approached, the desert's colors shifted, turning the landscape into hues of amber and rose. They prepared a small fire for warmth, and he helped gather wood under her guidance. The wind rustled softly through the scrub, carrying the scent of sage and distant sand. Sitting near the fire, he reflected on the day. The exhaustion, the lessons learned, the silent exchanges of trust. He realized that this simple companionship had restored something within him that he thought lost forever, the belief in human kindness and the hope of survival. Night fell once more, and the stars emerged, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. They huddled near the fire, each respecting the other's space, yet aware of the shared bond forming between them. Words were few, but understanding was profound. He realized that she had not saved him out of obligation, nor had she sought recognition. She had acted because it was right, and that simple truth resonated deeply. In the quiet desert night, surrounded by sand and sage, two souls healed together, finding solace in mutual trust and human compassion. By the time dawn approached again, he felt renewed, stronger than he had in days. Her quiet presence, guidance, and care had restored more than his physical strength. They had renewed his spirit. He understood that survival was not just about endurance. It was about learning, adapting, and connecting with those willing to guide you. She offered him not charity, but knowledge, patience, and respect, a gift more valuable than any food or water. Together, they had turned a harsh, unforgiving desert into a landscape of possibility, trust, and hope. By mid-afternoon, the sun bore down on the endless plains, casting heat waves that shimmered across the sand. They moved cautiously, following a narrow path through sparse scrub and jagged rocks. He watched her every movement, marveling at how she navigated the land with such precision. Each step was deliberate, each pause calculated. She seemed attuned to the desert itself, reading its subtle signs, the way the wind shifted, the tracks left by animals, the distant hum of heat on the horizon. He realized that survival wasn't just about endurance. It was about understanding the world around you. She spoke rarely, letting her actions teach him lessons words could not convey. When they reached a rocky outcrop, she paused, indicating a safe route down a steep incline. He followed her instructions carefully, noting how she moved with grace and confidence despite the uneven terrain. Her guidance was patient, never condescending. He had expected to struggle, to fail, yet under her watchful eye, he found a steadiness he hadn't known he possessed. Each step forward built trust, both in her and in himself. The desert, once a hostile expanse, began to feel navigable, even welcoming in its own harsh way. They stopped briefly near a shallow creek, the water glinting in the sunlight. She knelt to test it, motioning for him to drink. The cool liquid revived him, washing away the exhaustion from hours of travel. She pointed out edible plants along the bank, demonstrating how to identify them without tasting poison. He watched carefully, learning to read the subtle signs of the environment, each lesson reinforcing a growing sense of confidence. In her silent teaching, he discovered a new rhythm to life, one shaped not by fear, but by observation, patience, and respect for the land. As the day wore on, they came upon a ridge overlooking a vast stretch of desert. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of rolling dunes, distant mesas, and the occasional hardy tree. She paused, scanning the horizon for dangers and opportunities. He realized that her vigilance was not born of paranoia, but experience. Every decision she made, every path she chose, reflected a lifetime of survival in a land that demanded constant awareness. Watching her, he began to understand that courage was not always loud or heroic. It could be quiet, deliberate, and consistent. The sun descended lower, casting long shadows across the sand. The heat softened into a tolerable warmth, yet the day's exertions weighed heavily on him. She motioned to a small, sheltered area near a cluster of boulders, perfect for a temporary camp. As he set down his pack, he noticed the care with which she prepared their resting place, arranging rocks to block the wind, gathering wood for a fire, and checking the surroundings for signs of danger. Her attention to detail was meticulous, a combination of instinct and experience that left him both awed and grateful. He watched her work, feeling a growing admiration that went beyond mere gratitude. Her strength was quiet but undeniable, a blend of skill, resilience, and calm authority. She did not speak much, but her presence was enough to convey guidance and reassurance. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of safety, a rare luxury in the harsh desert. He realized that survival depended not only on physical stamina, but also on the support of those who understood and cared for you. In that moment, he felt the beginnings of trust and human connection taking root. Night fell, and the desert transformed under a canopy of stars. They sat near the fire she had built, the flames flickering and casting long shadows on the surrounding rocks. He could feel the cool night air settling over the plains, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. She offered him water and gestured for him to rest, her movements calm and deliberate. He accepted silently, letting the warmth of the fire and the presence of another human soothe the exhaustion and fear that had weighed heavily on him. As they settled, he reflected on the day's journey. He had entered the desert expecting death or loneliness, yet here he was, alive and guided by someone who had extended kindness without expectation. Her quiet confidence, patience, and skill had not only saved him physically, but also rekindled hope and purpose in his heart. For the first time in weeks, he realized that survival was more than endurance. It was trust, mutual respect, and the courage to accept help from another. The night was long but calm. He watched her sleep briefly, noticing the relaxed posture that came only from being truly at ease. In the flickering firelight, he understood that her presence had changed the harsh desert into a place of learning and renewal. He thought about the countless dangers he had faced alone, and how much easier the journey became with someone who knew the land and cared enough to guide him safely. The lesson was profound. Human connection, even in small gestures, could transform fear into resilience. When he finally allowed himself to rest, he felt a rare sense of peace. The desert, once unforgiving, now seemed a place of potential. He had learned to observe, to follow, to adapt, and most importantly, to trust. She had taught him without words, showing that guidance and support could be as vital as food or water. In the quiet of the night, under stars that spanned endlessly above, he understood that true courage was measured not only by facing danger alone, but by learning to endure and thrive with others. Dawn approached once again, casting a soft glow across the plains. They prepared to continue their journey, moving towards safer ground and away from the harshest threats of the desert. He walked beside her, careful to match her pace, noting the subtleties of the land she had pointed out along the way. Each observation, each instruction, reinforced the lessons of the previous day. He felt stronger, more aware, and more capable, realizing that his survival was intertwined with the guidance she had offered so generously. By midday, they had reached a secluded area with natural shelter from wind and sun. She gestured for him to rest while she assessed the terrain. He observed her silently, noting how she scanned the horizon for predators, checked for edible plants, and ensured the firewood was sufficient. Every action reflected a lifetime of learning and adaptation. He understood now that survival in the desert was more than brute strength. It was patience, attentiveness, and the willingness to act decisively when needed. He felt gratitude and awe for her quiet expertise. As evening fell, they settled once more near the fire. He noticed how naturally she moved through the shadows, tending to their needs without hesitation. He felt a deep respect, realizing that her actions were rooted in experience, resilience, and an unspoken moral compass. For him, the desert had become less hostile and more like a teacher under her guidance. Trust, courage, and connection had transformed the journey from one of despair to one of hope, proving that human support could turn the most unforgiving landscape into a place of growth and renewal. Night settled fully over the desert, stars illuminating the expanse with silver light. He reflected on the day's experiences, recognizing the strength and wisdom in the Apache widow's actions. She had taught him survival, trust, and resilience without expecting praise or reward. He had come to the desert expecting to end his story alone. Yet now he understood that the forbidden night held unexpected gifts, connection, guidance, and the courage to endure alongside someone who valued life as much as he did. By the time sleep claimed him, he knew that the lessons of the desert and her guidance would stay with him forever. He had learned that courage could be quiet, that trust could be life-saving, and that human connection was a powerful force even in the most isolated and unforgiving places. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope, safety, and the assurance that survival was not just about endurance, it was about guidance, respect, and compassion.